Live.
All right, welcome back, folks, to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, before we get started, don't forget for everybody to subscribe both to the website, to the archives if you want to listen ad free, and of course to the YouTube channel that you're listening on, Dr. J Radio Live. Remember, everything is the name of the show, DRJ Radio Live, for all social media. Now, we are broadcasting on 107.7 FM, New Orleans, Louisiana, UPRN, as well as many local affiliates throughout the country, the U.S., and through the globe, including Deprogrammed Radio in the United Kingdom, with London and Leeds as terrestrial stations they have in both AM and FM. And iHeartMedia for hosting such a show, surprisingly, where they still let some things talked about, which they want silent, and here and there they do monetize things, demonetize, like they did for this past 9/11 video that was actually streamed on 9/11 with some amazing truth. Now, I'm excited for today's show, and I've been excited for years trying to track down this guest, which fortunately we have, and he is on the air today. If you've all had a chance to see his bio on my website or anywhere else, he really needs no introduction, so let me just bring him on. Sergeant Clifford Stone, welcome to the show.
Thank you kindly, sir.
And I want to tell you, I thank you for your service to this country and to the world, really.
I appreciate that.
Now, let's go back to first before you even got into the military. Go back to 1952, and let's talk about an incident that happened in DC that many people listening will know about, that really triggered some events and ended up bringing you up front to extraterrestrials, living and dead, and you were able to communicate with them and see what they look like, and also see what their crashed ships look like. So let's start with 1952.
Well, actually, remember, I was born in 49, and it wouldn't be until 57 when I got in the full swing of things, even as a kid, not wanting to be involved in it. But 52 was a crucial year because two events happened in 1952 that almost got us involved, that almost got it to the point where they had to have full disclosure on UFOs. One, UFOs existed. Two, some UFOs were interplanetary. At that time, they were not aware that some UFOs were also multidimensional. On the night of July 19th and 20th, 1952, there was a UFO that went over Washington, D.C. Then they started to pick up several over Washington, D.C. The interesting thing is that they flew over, and they actually remained stationary over the White House, and the U.S. Air Force was powerless to do anything about those objects over the White House. The next day, there was major concern about that particular event, but it didn't get a whole lot of press. And the media kept saying, well, it's still under investigation. Now, a week later, a major event that made national and international headlines occurred on the night of July 26th and 27th, 1952. Numerous UFOs were flying over Washington, D.C. It was made clear during the time of the sighting by trained radar technicians who knew what they were doing, who knew the difference between a good, solid return, meaning it was an actual object, not a fairy, meaning it wasn't a temperature inversion or a ground return, that this was something real, and it was something reflected on the radar, and it was registering as a good, solid return. But many of these were being reported. At several times, they sent up flights of aircraft, F-94s, to try to intercept the UFOs. At one point, one F-94 was surrounded by the UFOs, and they kept closing in, and they kept thinking, okay, you know, this could result in the loss of that aircraft. But they told him, don't open fire. Well, in the official recording of the events, none of the UFOs were shot at, but I don't believe that to be true. Anyhow, in this particular incident, all of a sudden, the UFOs started to go ahead and break away, leaving the F-94 there all by itself. The pilot locked on to one UFO that was in front of him and hitting full afterburners. He tried to chase the UFO down, but it took off and left him like he was setting. Now, this all was recorded on radar. And the situation is that the very next day, the morning actually of July the 27th, the powers that be in Washington, key civilian leaders in Washington, from the president on down, demanded, and the key word is demanded, answers as to what happened yesterday, what happened last night. That we had these objects going over Washington, D.C., that, the entire control of the America, the people who were in control of America, was right there in Washington. And at one point, several UFOs went and remained stationary once again over the White House, meaning that the Air Force was helpless to do anything about these UFOs. And had they proven to be hostile, they could have went ahead, taken the president out, and taken out many other key leaders of the United States at that time.
Oh, I'm
So there
sure.
was a great demand.
Absolutely, and if you look at the Tunguska event, whether that would have been an accident or if that was a test on an extraterrestrial test of a weapon, the destruction of it was nothing, almost looked like a post-nuclear event, a nuclear detonation. So I would not be surprised that if they wanted this planet and they were hostile, then when they made that overflight, they would have shot straight into the White House and probably pulled an Independence Day right there.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, on the very day that incident occurred, July 26, 1952, at around noon on that day, there was an official order given by the Air Force that they were to shoot down any UFO that refused to land and follow the instructions of the ground crews and the pilots that were to intercept them. If they refused to follow those instructions to land at a specific base or something of this sort. Well, there were many people at the time, and Einstein was one of them, that said, well, you better back off on that. If these are craft coming from some other planetary system, and of course, at that time, we were very primitive. So we figured that if these were interplanetary spacecraft, they had to be coming from someplace like Mars or Venus. We could not comprehend at that time traversable wormholes, which meant that they could get here very quickly from other star systems that were light years away. So they went ahead and said, well, if they're that advanced to get here, then surely they have the means to defend themselves against such primitive weapons as rockets and guns. So by 5:30 that same afternoon, the order was rescinded that they were not to fire on any UFOs unless the UFOs showed what we call in the military as hostile intent. And that was a good thing because that very night you had many UFOs, at one point over 68 UFOs over Washington, D.C. Later on in August, there would be a similar incident in which it would be identified as 68 UFOs. And then once again, they were calling these temperature inversions, knowing darn good and well that that was an out-and-out lie. But it was necessary to do that because after this incident, all the way till January of 1953, there was a major effort within the intelligence community to try to get the full cooperation of all intelligence agencies to investigate UFOs. The Intelligence Advisory Committee was briefed, and they were working their way up to where the National Security Council would be briefed and would be requested, and there's even a draft of the document, to issue what was called a National Security Council intelligence directive that would have required the full cooperation of all intelligence branches to rapidly and quickly identify all UFOs, because at that time, up to the time of the Washington D.C. sighting, was very nonchalant. We're not worried about them. The order had already been given. You would not consider them as interplanetary spacecraft. But behind closed doors, it was made clear that it was still possible that some of these UFOs could, in fact, be interplanetary spacecraft. And I sent you some documents. When you look at those, you'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I did have a chance to see them, and I'd like to be able to post them for people to see at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I want the world to know what's been kept from them.
As a matter of fact, if my assistant producer, Joshua Chair, is in the chat listening right now, maybe if you could write a link if you have them, or find a way to share them, since you do have possession of them while we're on the show.
The biggest problem I have is I'm on Facebook, and due to medical considerations with myself and my wife, I haven't been able to do a whole lot with that, but there's some things that I have to start getting out there. But I don't actually have a link where they can get them. I'm trying to work to where, I'm a solo person, I guess you could say. I don't have a website or anything like that. When it comes to this information, I know that it's very important. That's why I tell everyone, if you get the document, please feel free to put them up. They're government documents. They're not copyrighted by anybody. And please feel free to go ahead and post them, because, the people need to see these documents. But unfortunately, I live on a fixed income. It's not about money with trying to get this information out. It's about trying to get the truth out. And the reason I decided to start talking and come forth, I knew that there were a lot of people, because of what I was doing, that even my family wasn't aware of what I was doing. But because of that, I knew there was a lot of people who was hurting. I knew there were people who couldn't even deal with the situations they had that came before them, and they took their own lives. There were people who committed suicide because of this. And that's kind of hard for me to deal with, knowing that we know the truth, and we are going to go ahead and convince people that, no, you did not see a circular aircraft land on the ground, door opened in the side, and some strange-looking entities came out, walked around, may even came over, carried on a conversation with you, then went back in the craft, and it took off. What you saw was swamp gas, and your imagination took over from there, so you were having hallucinations in which, to you, they were very real. But to, the scientific community, they understand this cannot happen. So it was just psychological trauma on you that resulted in you having these hallucinations that seemed very real to you. And there was an incident that happened, would you believe, there in Utah, very close to Area 51, in which a fighter pilot saw a UFO on the ground, and actually it made its way to Blue Book, but people don't even know it's there. They had to decide that, okay, what are we going to do? Well, they decided to go ahead and make this pilot look like he had, an hallucination, that it was all psychological, and that he really believed he saw what he thought he saw, but he really didn't. However, we know that he did see. There were other people who saw things who later came out and acknowledged it. In May of 1960,
mm-hmm.
an incident involving Gary Francis Powers over the former Soviet states, over Russia. He was flying a U-2, 80,000 feet. They had nothing that could shoot that craft down. But the U.S. government and the Soviet Union, because it made them look good in the eyes of the world, went ahead and said that the Soviet Union, that Russian ground crews and a lucky shot from a MiG-15 brought down the U-2 there. What was kept from the public was when they were considering court-martialing after they made the trade to get Gary Powers back, what was kept from the public, his testimony of what really happened. And he stated that he felt a vibration within the craft. He looked out and he could not see anything. It was like he was in an illuminated bowl of milk, per se. That there was just white light all the way around the craft. He couldn't see anything outside of the cockpit. He could not see the front of his craft, nothing. Anyhow, he doesn't even know how he remembers that he tried to go ahead and open the cockpit so he could go ahead and bail out of the U-2. But he was having problems with that. He remembered he blacked out several times, so he wasn't even sure how he got out. But the U.S. government went ahead, and they wasn't even believing him. There's no way that white light surrounding that could not be. If he got shot, a missile from the MiG-15 or flak from the ground fire, which couldn't even reach 80,000 feet, but they wasted no effort at trying to shoot the craft down. That's a given. But, the only thing that could explain what he was describing was a nuclear explosion, which would have totally destroyed the U-2 and the pilot, Francis Powers. So something happened that even a year after the event, the scientists that some of the investigators talked to said, well, what really happened on that day remains a mystery. We have no explanation for it. And what a lot of people weren't aware of, that right there actually probably prevented the Cold War from becoming hot, because the Russians was very angry about the U.S. having aircraft that could fly over their territory and take reconnaissance photographs. And they made it very clear they were not happy with this. So the whole situation is there's things in history that happen, which, let's say the UFO was really shot down, the U-2 that Powers was piloting that day. People would say, okay, that's a hostile act. No, it was a means of preventing us idiots from going ahead and doing something that would ultimately lead to a nuclear war. And one thing important to remember at that time, the United States government really believed that between 1960 and 1962, the Soviet Union would in fact launch a sneak attack on the United States. We believed we could win. And there's a 5-part video, and hopefully I should get that sent to you to where you can watch it, that shows how we plan to win. Well, there aren't going to be, I know, because I was involved in it, there aren't any winners in a nuclear exchange. There's various degrees of losses on both sides and no winners.
Now, let me ask you this, as I'm sure all the people listening and people who have tuned in on YouTube to listen want to know, when did you get started and what was it like to actually encounter ETs and what did they look like, and all these fascinating questions that come around. So let's just go with the beginning of when were you first involved? When was your first time that you came upon a crashed UFO, and how did that happen?
That was in 1969. Let me explain to the people right now that they may choose to believe or disbelieve. I know what I'm about to say is true because I lived it. And I have to state this first off because as I tell it, I see it in my mind's eye in living color. And I get emotional and I can't help that. Because it's a part of the life of my life I wish I could get. I wish was never a part of my life, if you can understand.
Yeah. That's the secrecy.
But it goes all the way back to the time I was a child.
Or the implications. Or both.
And, I'm sorry?
Do you think the reason why it's so painful to talk about is because of what it did to you for such a period of time of the double life, or what it meant of what you were actually doing as and who you were interacting with, or the secrecy, or all of the above?
Oh, you're loyal to your country, but your
Yes.
country's putting you through a living hell to try to make sure you're going to keep quiet about it.
Yes.
And my indoctrination initially started right there at Fort Belvoir, where we took some officers. Like I took Lieutenant Snyder. He was the NBC officer for my unit, 36 Civil Affairs Company there at Fort Lee, Virginia. They were having an orientation for the NBC officers for the quick reactionary teams that would go out in the event there was a nuclear, biological, or chemical accident, to go out immediately, secure the area, and clean it up. Well, these same teams were used because you don't rewrite a new book. You go ahead and use this old standard, the old standby, and that's what we did. If there was a UFO crash, or a lot of times they call them objects of unknown origin, you would go out and secure the area. Then you would start picking up all the debris or the whole craft if there was one, and start moving it back to a secure area. From the secure area, you'd go ahead and send it back to the they went to Wright-Patterson first off,
Hmm.
because they had the facilities there that actually reviewed the potential for back engineering some of the technology. And it's the buildings are still there today. The same thing still continues to this day, and there's 4 hangars there. And the intent is to go ahead and try to back engineer or reverse engineer technology that you come into contact with. And also, this would include potential enemy countries such as the former Soviet Union or even Russia today, where if we got technology that appeared to be highly advanced, more than some of the technology, we would try to back engineer it and incorporate it into our technology, making it part of our technology. But the first time, you know, uh, that I got involved with seeing a UFO, we went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, and we were on a field training exercise. And I was, for my unit, I was the NBC slash communications non-commissioned officer. I had a deuce and a half, and I had the commo equipment that my company was using, and I also had the NBC equipment that we were using and that I had to maintain. So while we were there, and I know it was cold. I don't remember what month it was, but the only thing I had was like a Coleman lantern, a military Coleman lantern, that I was trying to keep warm in the back of that deuce and a half. Long about midnight, I went ahead and I was told to go ahead and disconnect the fuel phones from my switchboard, the SV-22 we had, and get my vehicle ready to move out, and then move another vehicle in there to go ahead and take care of the people who were going to be staying behind on the field training exercise. But I was to go and assist in a quick reaction force to go ahead secure an area where allegedly a craft went down, a experimental aircraft of ours went down. So I went ahead and took everything off of the switchboard
Hmm.
and got ready to go. So I joined the convoy. We had about 4 deuce and a halves, 2.5-ton trucks, and 3 Jeeps. And I'm not sure how long we traveled. It was, maybe an hour or something like that. And as we approached an area, and we were in what we call blackout drive, where you don't have headlights or anything. We approached an area that already had the light alls, the big lights surrounding an area, because we could see that the big bright lights was surrounding an area of something. And we thought, okay, that's where the plane crashed. So as we got closer, we went ahead. We could see that they had military personnel running around. You had scientific personnel who were in lab coats and not uniforms. You had some people who were in what we called mop suits, which were NBC military attire if you were going into a contaminated area that was contaminated with biological, chemical, or radiological material. So we got there, and I had the guy, I'd always call him after that. I'd always call him the colonel. He was always the one that was in charge. But he went ahead, came up to me, and he says, okay, son, I need you to take your Geiger counter, and the Geiger counter I was using at the time was a SPD 27, and I need you to go walking toward the aircraft. And that's the way he put it, aircraft. And I need you to call back the points of radiation that you're reading as you approach the craft. And I started to go ahead and approach it. And as I approached it, and it was at about a 45-degree tilt into the ground. It impacted into the ground. And, you could see it was like the heel of a shoe, if you understand what I'm saying, with the curvature that's towards the front of the heel. That was the back side of it. So I, thought this is a highly unusual configuration for any aircraft that I've seen. But I started to go, and I kept calling out the readings I was getting. And as I got to the top, I looked down there, and I could see that there was like a canopy, and on the side there was like a kidney-shaped door that was open, halfway hanging out. Was a creature which we just typically call a gray. And
Alive?
I'm sorry?
Alive?
No, it was dead.
Sorry
And
to hear that.
I immediately started, when you're what they call an interfacer, you actually feel the pain, the hurt, the thoughts of these little creatures. And, it's hard to explain how that works. But I went ahead and I called out and I said, I need an officer here. I need an officer. And the guy I always called the colonel, he said, it's okay, son, just report what you're seeing. And I said, sir, this isn't one of our craft. This is a craft that never, ever was made here on Earth. Even the people flying it, they're not from our planet. They're different. And he went ahead and says, just report what you see. And I said, come up here and look for yourself, sir. I said, what is here is something out of a science fiction movie. And he said, is it moving? I said, no, the little guy's dead. And I knew then, they have families, and they're thinking about their families. And I was picking up on all this. So he finally told me, he says, okay, you come on back down. And I got back down. He says, okay, I need you to go back and get in the back of your deuce and a half. And, of course, we had the tarp over it. And they went ahead and said, okay, you're going to be our communications NCO there. And we've already attached up some of the field phones. And keep your 2 Prick 25s. Those were field radios. And listen for any incoming traffic that we might need you to go ahead and head up on. And at that time, they went ahead and connected up a Prick 46, which was a larger radio that would normally go on the back of a Jeep or something of this sort. I could hear communications coming in, but I wasn't actually involved in, interacting with any of the communications. But I stayed back there until morning. The sun started to come up, and I looked out and I saw that they had these cranes that was picking up the craft and putting it on the back of a flatbed tractor-trailer truck.
Mm-hmm.
And they covered it with a tarp, and it was driving out. And I saw that they had a field ambulance.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how many bodies they had, but they had bodies there. of the little creatures that was inside the craft. I didn't see any living at that time. But then all of us that was involved in this, and a lot of times some of the people who were involved, they were only involved one time. They went ahead and they stated, okay, we have to debrief you. So that when they debriefed us, they told us that this had to be hush-hush. They had a cover story which would show where we had a captured Russian aircraft that we were flying, testing out its capabilities, and it accidentally crashed, and that the pilot was killed, and that was going to be the cover story. But this was no Soviet aircraft that we captured or otherwise. This was totally a craft that did not originate on this planet. And that was the first incident that I was involved in.
And how long before? Well, first of all, after the incident, when it finally hit you, what you did, and the implications of life coming from other planets and highly advanced craft, and were able to communicate with you in a way that nobody else had communicated with you, how did that make you feel?
Well, see, when I went into the military, I was 4F. I wasn't supposed to go in the military. But at the time, I felt one of the greatest things that a person could do was to serve in the military, to serve their country. And I always wanted to go in. My brother was in the Air Force, so I wanted to go into the Air Force. But when I went and tried to get in, they were telling me, no, you have certain medical problems. Then I remember his name, Sergeant Pope. He came there at Tays Valley High School, and I was in my senior year. And he was talking about, going into the late entry program. I went ahead and talked to him about wanting to go into the late entry program and even about becoming a helicopter pilot. Well, I went to Fort Hays in Columbus, Ohio. And when I went there, once again, it was official this time. I was 4F. I was rejected from military service. And that really bothered me because I really wanted to serve because, the Vietnam War was going on. There were people against it. And with me, at the time, I thought, God, country, mom's apple pie, my country can't do anything wrong. That if they were involved in something, it was, officially okay with God, So when I got back there, I went and I saw the recruiter. Took a couple of my friends down to the recruiting office that wanted to go ahead and go into the military, and I talked to the recruiter there. And he went ahead and says, oh, I've heard of you. And I thought, you have? Well, I've only been back in town because now I was back in my hometown, Portsmouth, Ohio. And prior to that, I was living there, going through Tays Valley High School out of Circleville, Ohio, which was about 90-some miles away. It was only about 4 or 5 miles away from Lockburn Air Force Base, which I spent a lot of time there. But he went ahead and he says, I understand you really want to go in the military. And I said, yes, if I could, I'd go in. And he says, well, let me see what I can do. Then, a couple of days later, he called me and says, look, we need to take you down for reevaluation at Ashland, Kentucky, because that's where the AFE station was, the Armed Forces Entrance Examination Station. So I went ahead and I went, and my written test, I passed all those with flying colors, but the doctor there, he was a captain, he goes ahead and says, I'm sorry, Mr. Stone, but, you have a medical problem, and you're going to have that medical problem for life. And military service is only going to exacerbate it a whole lot more. So we have to reject you. Well, they had a person from Walter Reed Hospital who was a colonel. He came up and told the captain, go ahead, because it was on a Friday, take the rest of the day off and, take your family to Camden Park, which is a park that had rides and things of this sort for the kids there in Huntington, West Virginia, and it wasn't that far away. He says, I'll go ahead and I'll finish up the medicals here for you. Well, all of a sudden, I'm the last person to go in now. Then when I went in, the colonel says, okay, I understand you really want to go in the military. And I went ahead and I said, well, yes, sir. I said, you got a lot of people who are getting drafted that really don't want to go. You got a lot of people that are leaving the country because they're afraid of being drafted. I said, the way I see it, if I could get in, I would be taking the place of one of those people who don't want to go. And a lot of them have reasons. They have families. I am just me. And he says, okay, I'm going to go ahead and sign off on your paperwork. And you need to know that if any time you want to get out in the next 180 days, actually it's 179 days, all you have to do is bring up your medical problem, and they will start out processing you from the military. And I told him at that time, I said, you know what, sir? You get me in, I'm not going to squabble about trying to get out. Well, he got me in. And then when I went in, you go through basic training. I mean, they treat you like dirt when you're going through basic training. And I'm thinking, gee, you guys should treat me a little better because, I'm volunteering for this. But no. And I had a Sergeant House. He was one of my drill sergeants. And he told me after we graduated from basic, he says, we do all this for a reason. Because it's an effort to try to condition you, should you fall into the hands of the enemy as a POW, you'll be able to take it a whole lot easier, and if we went ahead and use kid gloves on you. And I thought, well, you got my attention anyhow. But anyhow, I went through AIT, then I went through some special training. But AIT, I'm supposed to be there learning how to use a typewriter. Day one, I got to see a typewriter. Thereafter, I did not have anything to do with a typewriter. I was always on cleanup detail, things of this sort. And I'd have to go over to the post-intelligence headquarters. And there was a person there visiting from Washington, D.C., who struck up a conversation with me, and I went over there on, I don't know, many of the nights that I would have to go over and work there to do cleanup detail there. But he'd always go ahead and tell me, he said, how do you feel about UFOs? Well, my mama didn't raise any fools, so I went ahead and I said, I really don't have no opinion. He says, I don't believe that. I think you have a great interest in UFOs. Well, that's news to me. I'm thinking, okay, where's he coming from with all this? Anyhow, he went ahead and said that he was a strong believer in UFOs and told me about some of the things he knew. Now, that started to get me a little concerned because these were conversations that I felt we really shouldn't be having. But still, they were just conversations. But then one day I went in, he went ahead, he had some folders there. And he brought them out, and he showed me some of the documentation that was in the folders. And he says, these are things the American people know nothing about. And they start talking about some of the technology that was involved with UFOs. And, I knew what top secret meant on the documents, but they had top secret / then they'd have another word, or, sometimes several words, because at that time they could have it so deep dark they could have 11 code words following the top secret, which meant you had to have access to all those programs that were identified by the code words to even see that document. Mm-hmm. Now that started to concern me because now I'm seeing things, and at that time I didn't even know I had a security clearance, which I wasn't supposed to have. But during basic, they went ahead and got me a secret clearance based on an INAC. Well, with that, anytime I'd be involved in any situation, they would go ahead and give me the security clearance I needed on a one-time basis to do what I had to do. So some of the things I was involved in at that time was top secret sensitive compartment information and special access programs that I wasn't supposed to really have any connection with. I mean, I wrote documents about certain situations we were involved in recovery of these objects that after I wrote them, I couldn't see them no more because I wasn't cleared with the high enough classification to see this, even though I wrote it, to even see the document again. But, I went back and I thought, okay, the military does certain things strange. It would not be until I got here in Roswell. I was stationed at the New Mexico Military Institute, and we were involved in certain things with UFOs at that time because now, it was about to open up about the UFO crash here in Roswell. And Bill Moore did his book, and that was in 1985, and they were starting to come out. And, I didn't request to come to Roswell. I requested at the beckoning of the Pentagon, they needed 71 Limas, which is my MOS, a admin specialist, to go to the Multinational Observers Force in the Cyanide. So I volunteered to go. And I got a call from the Pentagon saying, no. You haven't been back in the States long enough to go back overseas, which I already knew was a bunch of baloney. Because, you had people came back and was here for 8 months or a year, and they were back overseas. And, people on the Air Defense Command in the Army, they would be back here about 8 months or so. Then the place they'd be sending them back to would be Korea, because they had a large contingency of Air Defense Command units at that time there. But anyhow, they said, no, we're going to be sending you to Roswell, New Mexico. Well, I wasn't even making the connection. I already knew about the alleged crash here. And I'm wondering, okay, what do they have there? And, of course, at that time, I was at Keesler Air Force Base. And, oh, by the way, at Keesler Air Force Base, they actually instructed people from the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Air Force intelligence units that would be involved in the recovery of these things. They actually taught them there. It was about a 7-week course on moon dust and blue flight.
I'm actually, that's interesting you say that, because Richard Doty, when I asked him who was in charge of crash and retrievals, he said it was the DIA. So you just confirmed the Defense Intelligence Agency was, in fact, the retrieval agency that was tasked with it.
Well, yeah, the DIA had all operational control of all that because they reported directly to the Director of Central Intelligence. And every Director of Central Intelligence, and I don't care if they get mad at me or want to come and shoot me or make me have an accident, I don't care. The Director of Central Intelligence, all the way back to the time of the Office of Strategic Services, which was the forerunner of the CIA, they were the initial keeper of the secrets when it comes to UFOs. And the one unit that they use, which reports directly to a CIA agency, which was known as the Office of Scientific Intelligence, it was the DIA, because the DIA provided the legwork to go ahead in any country, even if we didn't have forces there. If all we had was an embassy, let's say, or a attaché office, the DIA had people there, which they called the country team. And the country team, they worked with other things too. I mean, it was an additional duty when it came to moon dust and blue fly, which dealt with the recovery of only two things: objects of non-U.S. origin that survives re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere and impacts with the Earth, or objects of unknown origin. Moon dust and blue fly to this day are highly classified. The Air Force is going to deny this. I did a report in 1992 that I won members of Congress to see. If you get a copy of it, and I hope you got a copy of that from our friend that I sent it to, he wanted to know if he could tell, and I told him, yes, go ahead, please.
Well, I can guarantee you, I can hand place it into some of the retired members of Congress and Senate that I do know. But I do know some people in the current Trump administration that I could probably try to insert it to, as long as they don't get indicted or are in trouble from the Mueller investigation like Roger Stone, but I could try.
Oh well, I'll tell you right now that report made its way as a result of Congressman Joe Skeen, who was the congressman for our district here in Roswell. I sent him a copy, and there's a letter there that he sent back to me where he makes it clear they were asking questions about the recovery of certain objects that came in from space and impacted with the Earth. And there was a high classification of gathering this material. And at that time, we had an organization which had been around since the late 50s, which even members of Congress didn't even know it existed. That was what was called the National Reconnaissance Organization. When it was first organized under the Eisenhower administration, the vice president wasn't even brought into the chain till later on. At that time, they had about, I think, 24 people who actually knew of the existence of the NRO, the National Reconnaissance Organization, and its function. One of its functions was to go and recover objects that entered from space and impacted with the Earth. And of course, the situation was that this was to go ahead and recover Soviet satellites if they survived re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere, so we could try to gather as much technical intelligence from these debris as possible, and then we would turn them back over to the Soviet Union. Well, the whole situation is some of the documentation has been released by the NRO. Make it clear that one of the missions of the NRO was to monitor unidentified flying objects in space, not unknown satellites, not Soviet satellites, which they did both. They did that. But unidentified flying objects in space. And this information was not shared with the Air Force, but it was shared with the CIA's Office of Special Intelligence. That information to this day remains classified. The NRO has released documentation that was a top secret SCI classification level that clearly shows this happened. We took photographs of these objects. The NRO to date has not released those photographs. Why? So, the whole situation is, in 1992, they still wasn't opening up. Congress was holding meetings at that time, and I cannot find the congressional documents on this, but if you look at the letter that's in the front of that document that I did and tried to get into the hands of every member of Congress, you'll see Joe Skeen makes it clear he's not on the committees that was holding the hearings, but they were holding hearings and they were asking the questions about government agencies withholding information from members of Congress, and among that information they were concerned about was space objects that impacted the Earth. When at that time, the U.S. government, the military organizations, and here again, the people who was within the CIA that did not go ahead and acknowledge even the existence of the NRO, stated emphatically, we share everything with members of Congress. Well, when they got hit with this document, in order to explain, the documentation it clearly shows that we recovered objects of unknown origin, which the Air Force was stating that moon dust and blue fly, these missions never existed. There was not a unit at Fort Belvoir that would deal with UFOs. Now, in that report, a 176-page report that I did, it made it clear that, that unit at Fort Belvoir did exist, and that moon dust and blue fly did exist, and they're stating it, when they finally had to come and tell certain members of Congress that I've been writing to, well, yeah, they existed, but they were never used. Now they had to show, well, yeah, they were used. So they said, oh, yeah, but then they went ahead and tied the NRO into it. Now, the National Reconnaissance Organization was now exposed, and all of Congress was briefed on the existence of the National Reconnaissance Organization. In 1994, there were a couple new members of Congress who said, wait a minute, are we actually gathering objects from space? And they wasn't making, the connection between foreign satellites and us trying to get intelligence data from them or anything like that. So they went ahead and asked the question again. So once again, in 1994, Congress had to be briefed again about the existence of the National Reconnaissance Organization. But now the cat's out of the bag. It would not be until 2010 that the National Reconnaissance Organization would finally open up and start releasing documentation. And I've been on their hindsight ever since they've done that. And, when I know that they're releasing documents, I'm Johnny on the spot trying to download as much as I can. And I'll go in and, well, there was one document that the CIA had. And it was something about, the investigation of unidentified flying objects, 431 pages. Well, it had already been released, but they had not made a PDF file to put on their website. And you're not going to find this document in the two websites that they have dedicated to UFOs. But it's in the CREST general files, in which the files are reviewed, and then they're released. They're declassified. But if you don't know what to look for, you can't get them. Well, this one wasn't even on any of their websites. They had not reduced it to a PDF file to put in their general files, even on the file they had there in the Pentagon, or there at the CIA. So I filed a FOIA request requesting it. And they went ahead and made a copy, released it to me. I had to pay something like $40 for everything there. But with the cover letter, I thought it was really nice of them to tell me this is a document which is a part of a much larger document. And I have no idea what that much larger document is. But I would assume it's sometime in 55, which goes all the way back to 1952 when they were trying to go ahead and stop the National Security Council from having to be briefed. Had it not been for the Robinson panel, they would have been briefed. But with the Robinson panel coming out with their conclusions, which were totally bogus, and stating that there was no need to bother the National Security Council, there was nothing to UFOs, and that we should just establish a program, which affectionately was called, by the way, Operation Ridicule. You were to ridicule people who reported UFOs officially. And they felt that this would make the UFOs go away. People would still be seeing them, but they wouldn't want to be ridiculed.
Yeah, they'd be labeled as the tin hat people.
Oh, absolutely.
The crazy redneck hillbilly driving at 2 in the morning down a lonely road and being the only witness. Oh, yeah, and the swamp gas explanation. Absolutely. J. Allen Hynek even said that.
We had a problem. When you did this, you had pilots, members of the North American Air Defense Command, who were scrambled to intercept UFOs, and they were expected to report exactly what they saw. In one of the status reports of Project Blue Book, it makes it clear, it's Project Stork. They make it clear while they're talking to some pilots about seeing UFOs, how they would deal with them. One pilot went ahead and says, I'm talking for every pilot here, and others around the United States and around the globe. If I personally saw a UFO, and if I was flying, when these are his words, wingtip to wingtip with a spacecraft I would not report it for fear of ridicule. At that time, the high command knew that they had a problem. They had to do something to convince their pilots to report it. Because, you may have 100,000 incidences with UFOs that are truly interplanetary spacecraft, and nothing happens. It only takes that one time in which they may prove to be hostile. And we were even told, and if you know anything about me, you know I do not believe that our visitors are hostile, that they are, due to the fact that they survive their own technology to such high degree where they can come here from there, that this shows that they are beyond this stupidity of war. But the situation is, we were always told that not all contact would be of a friendly nature. And to this day, I'm not sure totally what that means. Because even when I was the one I helped escape there at Fort Belvoir, he was willing to let himself die so none of us would get hurt. And his primary concern was not seeing his family again, but even higher than that, his people were coming to get him.
Oh, really? Interesting you said that, because I've always wondered if they do in fact send recovery missions and if their telepathy allows them to do that.
Absolutely. The SOP, standard operating procedure, if we arrived on station and their visitors were already there, they'd leave the debris for us to pick up. Us children really couldn't understand everything. But their bodies, if there were, the bodies that was left behind, that was killed in the crash, or if they were living entities that were still there, they would pick those up. And actually, they even had an incident there in Edwards Air Force Base in 1963.
Right here in California. That's nice to know. Okay, that's actually, I think there's one in Preston's
at the Dry Lake bed.
Yes, which was formerly what was it called before? It was the name is eluding me right now. Before it was Edwards, Muroc Airfield. Yes.
Yes. But they sent a strike team up there, which is a heavily armed guard unit, because they saw the UFO come down the Dry Lake bed. So they sent the team out there.
Sergeant Stone, real quick, before I want you to hang tight for one, hang that thought. Let me just ask you, because we got a lot of questions, and I have a lot of my own still. I wanted to ask if you can stay for an extra hour than planned, the original 2 hours, so we can have an after show where you get to interact with all these people who have all these amazing questions for you.
Okay, that will work for me if you let me have a break for about 5-10 minutes.
Sure.
I have medical problems where, certain bodily functions I have to take care of.
Yeah, no, we'll do that. You just tell me when you need your break, and if you want to do it as we end from UPRN, by all means, we'll do that in about 45 minutes, if that's okay. That'll give you the break. Okay, so now let's continue with the Edwards crash.
Well, they went ahead. They sent a strike team out. And now that's a heavily armed guard unit. So as they're driving out, approaching to where the craft went down, and it was a craft, it was sitting there on the ground, there in the Dry Lake bed. As they approached it, another craft came down and flew right over the craft that was on the ground. And as that craft started to go up, the craft that was on the ground started to, like a pendulum, back and forth, very slowly, was picked up and was taken back up by this craft that was over it, and it ascended into the sky, into the sky, and eventually both craft disappeared. Now here again, it's a presumption on my part, but I think it's a correct presumption. They had a craft that had mechanical problems, and remember that they may be vastly more intelligent than we are. Technology may be more vastly superior to ours, but for lack of a better term, the human factor comes into play. So they have accidents and they have malfunctions. So in this case, I believe they had a malfunction, and they sent another craft to recover that craft that went down because it was intact. It didn't crash or anything. It was like it landed, but it was having problems. So they came and got it. And the interesting thing about that was at least until 1975, that was a Project Blue Book report. And it was in the Project Blue Book files. There was major concern about that case when it came out, up to and including me being asked, "Are you sure this is from the Blue Book files? Would you like to see it on the microfilm that I got from you folks?" So up to that time, yes, it was there. And it was a Blue Book file. And I think that was by sheer accident. Project Twinkle, Blue Book was not to have anything to do with Project Twinkle. They came across some records in the OSI files that dealt with Blue Book, and they were wondering, what do we do with these? Well, that dealt with Project Twinkle, because OSI, Office of Special Investigations, the U.S. Air Force's Office of Special Investigations. Now, Doty was with OSI, so he'd understand immediately what I'd be talking about.
Office of Special Investigations, which he actually said, Sergeant Stone, maybe you can confirm this, because, see, a lot of people come to me and say that he is a disinformation agent, which is true. That is exactly what he did, counterintelligence, but now he's, I believe, is telling the truth because of what he said, that he heard enough people talking about this subject where they were half right and half wrong and wanted to set the researchers straight, especially, and even still said that he can't talk about certain things if it had to do with technology or medicine, but if it had to do with aliens, he could talk freely. Just like you, in fact, are able to talk, Sergeant Stone, which I'm glad because you're the only person that I know of that's been involved in crash and retrievals.
There's others out there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I've known you as the one who's been for years, too. I've seen in Greer, who had interviewed several for for what he did in 2001, the Disclosure Project. But there was one young man who talked about one in Peru, I believe, or something in somewhere South America. But it was one crash, I believe, that he talked about. You were at how many total?
In my lifetime in the military, there were 12 total events that I was involved in.
Wow.
Now, that being said, there were situations where I would give talks on UFOs to specific military groups and at special occasions, which I found that to be kind of shocking because I figured they wouldn't want me to talk. We had a get-together for the governor of Bulgaria, or I think I'm saying it right. Mm-hmm. It's like a state, and he would be like a state governor there in Germany. And I really didn't want to attend that, but I was told, you're going to attend it, so we went ahead, and we went there, and when I got there, the, like governor, only they say president, you know, they were told, he asked, well, you know, I know you got this one man here who has a high interest in UFOs, and I was wondering if he would talk to me and some of the other people. Well, we went into a room, and we had, I don't know, maybe 50 people in there, and I went and asked one of the officers there, I said, you know, there's some things I'm not sure whether I should be able to talk about, and I said, you know, don't even worry about it. You know, if you know about something, go ahead and talk. I said, okay, what if I were to tell you that we recovered crashed spacecraft? He says, then fine, you want to talk about it, talk about it.
Now, said, okay. Was anyone telling you can't?
Oh, they were telling me I could go ahead and not to worry about it, just talk about it.
Even though they were ridiculing other people, did they ever try to ridicule you?
Oh, yeah, they tried to court-martial me.
Okay.
If you ever make it down here, I will show you the documentation covering the 8 plus months of hell I went through because I started to talk about UFOs. And it all started when Senator Pete Domenici's office called me there at my office there at New Mexico Military Institute.
Oh, well, I
was
promise you
out.
I will be there because I already said I have to go to Nevada to do a live stream with John Lear, and I would think that's a perfect way to continue east onto Roswell to get to learn everything you have to say and maybe film you there and film your documents too.
Well, you'll get to see all the documents. But be ready for a shock. Most people don't realize how much I have.
Oh, I believe you do. You have a lot. I mean, from what you already sent me, which is just 6 different PDF files that have between like 11 and 40 from what I saw already. Oh, I'm sure you have, what, I think you said 500,000 documents last night?
I have over 500 million documents.
Oh, geez. Okay, 500,000,000. I'm sorry about that. Wow. Okay. Now, let me jump the guns and go back to aliens. Let me ask you something interesting that is just coming to my head, and it's actually more of a theoretical question, but it's practical to you. Now, if in fact the technology they are using is anti-gravity, then by default and according to the theory of relativity and what Einstein has talked about with gravity, then gravity can affect time-space continuum and therefore dimension, and therefore by definition these craft are not traveling in straight lines from their destination. They're actually jumping through dimensions, and these dimensions are also void of time, or you could say in fact that they are time travelers. So being that, did any of the ETs you had contact with, Sergeant Stone, did they ever say to you when you came upon them after they had crashed that they knew they would meet you?
Well, I know before Corona became my lifetime companion, to put it that way, there was actually a female, and we were kids at the time. I mean, I was what 7 years old because this incident happened in '57. Anyhow, I would get out of school, Highland Elementary School there in Portsmouth, Ohio, and I had, I don't know, 10 blocks or so I had to walk home. And about the third block down, I'd run into her. And she always, she was a little blonde-headed girl. But, they'd always caution me, do not tell other people about us. And I'm saying, come on, with other people walking with, they see you. And no, they don't. You're the only one that can see us. And I talked to a couple of my friends, don't you see this person? And they, what are you talking about? Well, now I knew something strange was going on. And I went ahead, and this little, as I saw her, like I said, a little girl about the same age as me, but she was supposed to be the one to follow me. For some reason, there was a change that took place. And I know the reason, but the day I die, I'll try to make sure people know. But until that happens, I don't really want to say because it sounds really screwy. And it was decided that this little boy, who was actually Corona, would be the one to follow me. Now, I found out later on because, I always like to help little animals. If they were hurt, I'd go ahead and try to nurse them back to help.
They were, in fact, more than that because they were, as far as size, right, they were little. But they were far more intelligent, would you say, or at least advanced? Would you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, it was just from a child's viewpoint. Remember, I was a child. They helped me with my homework, And that was kind of weird because they would be explaining things to me, And, well, your people don't know about this yet. And what do you mean? But I
Interesting.
always saw them as children.
Tell me something that they told you that to teach you that we as humanity don't know.
What are you referring to?
Something they in fact told you that you said they were teaching you stuff, and they would say you people haven't learned this yet. Your people. What is there something you could tell us that they told you that we don't know yet? That I don't know yet?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in very layman's terms, they were trying to explain to me how they traverse the great distances of space. And now the one thing that they didn't really want to go into detail with me and was not happy when I found out about it, there are two means of propulsions that they have. Like they have antimatter drive, and me knowing about antimatter drive, that was okay. First time I heard of negative matter, they were pretty concerned that I knew something about that, and they told me, well, you know how antimatter drives, right? And I said, yeah, I understand the fundamentals of how that's supposed to work. Says, well, then, same difference, well, it's not. But when they use, and I have to use the 100 light years of travel because Corona actually comes from a planet that's 100 light years from planet Earth. So he says in order to get here in real time using antimatter, it's an hour and 40 minutes in real time through a traversable wormhole. Now, if you use negative matter, then whether it's 100 light years or 100 million light years, you can go ahead and travel the distances where time is irrelevant. It's like stepping inside of one doorway into the next doorway. That there's no time involved, no measurable time. So, I'm still trying to understand all of that. But, when you travel through a traversable wormhole, you are actually doing travel through multi-dimensions. And they are well aware, and they were very well aware long before we are. Now, we're to the point where it's not well known to the public, but we're aware of the fact that other dimensions exist. And we're to the point right now where we actually believe scientifically at least 6 other dimensions exist. But I can tell you right now, there are many more dimensions.
Well, do you think it's infinite, actually, as string theory, or the dimensions? Even other theories that say that there is like, for instance, the fact that
I think it could be endless.
Okay.
I mean, we try to go ahead and put a number on it, but the situation is there are many things we can't put a number on. How many grains of sand is on the seashore? Yet, if you go ahead and enter all the seashores, all the grains of sand on all the seashores on this planet, those grains of sand would not equal the number of stars that's within our universe. Now, when I say our universe, that's one universe. Yet in the vastness of space, in our I hate to use the term three-dimensional reality, but that's the best way to put it. Three-dimensional reality, our universe is there. But beyond vast distances of darkness, there's other universes. But within the same realm of reality that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I learned from our visitors with the death of my son, because I asked to go back 15 minutes before his death. So I could go back and I could stop the accident from happening.
Really? I thought now, as far as time travel, you were never allowed to influence a past event, because if you did, then in fact this reality would be in another dimension.
Oh, that's exactly what they told me. They went ahead and said, if you go back and you change, and as they put it, and I mean they use this term, God in his infinite wisdom put a barrier up because, it's within the intellectual culpability of any species to want to go back in time and change wrongdoings to right.
Sure, everyone wants a
But
second
the whole
chance.
situation is in the space-time continuum, and that's the term I'm afraid I have to use. People say, "Oh, are we going back to the movie, Back to the Future?" No. The term actually exists that we are in. This is, from the beginning of our time, if you wish to say the Big Bang Theory, all the way up to where we are right now, in the reality that we are in. Now, you go back and you change anything, even back to the time of the dinosaurs, our Neanderthal man. You change anything back there, you've altered the course of history and created a whole new chain of events. Anything and everything that happened prior to that will now be in another parallel reality. So, like if you go back and you stop the Second World War, to us in this space-time continuum, the Second World War will still be a reality to us. But we've created an entirely different branch of the trunk of the tree we find ourselves in which everything else is the same, with the exception of the Second World War didn't happen, so whatever the outcome of not having the Second World War would have been, it's now in that altered reality. So you exist side by side, and the whole situation is you're in this reality, but now with that other reality, you exist in that reality. Now, if you have 100 different multi-realities because you went back and you changed things in time, the one thing that our visitors pointed out to me, and I think people should find this very interesting, because, I asked about the existence of God. I mean, particularly the death of my son.
Oh,
And I
very
was
interesting
worried about
question.
the answer. But what happened is they went ahead and they told me the one thing that, and they don't have an answer for this, believe it or not.
Interesting.
But
wow.
They went ahead and said, you have to ask yourself, you go back at all these other realities in which you exist in, and, you don't know about them, they don't know about you, but the question is, they are you. Do they all share the same soul? And I can tell you, behind closed doors, some key people within scientific organizations within the government ask that same question, and at times think if this could be the answer to certain type of mental illnesses that we experience in this lifetime. I didn't get too involved in that because I wasn't supposed to be a party to that. I mean, I'm referring to the people I know that actually deal with this within the government hierarchy. Because I have people who talk to me, but I make it a point to forget them, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm not going to put them in harm's way. But the whole situation is, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. And, they don't have no answer for that. Now, the night that I asked that, they went ahead and said, you know what, we can't go and let you change that or go back, 15 minutes prior to the accident. But tonight, we will let you visit with your son. And that night, I went to bed. I went to sleep. Then all of a sudden, I woke up and I looked over. And when I looked over at the clock, it was, I think, a little after midnight. And then I laid back down. Then it was like, I was having this dream where I entered an altered reality. And I got to meet with my son, and they told me anything that you and your son talk about on this side of that uh, veil that you call heaven, you will remember fully. But if you cross over into that veil, you won't remember anything you talked about.
Is that why people stay around as ghosts? To remember things?
I have no idea. But I do know what we talked about. I mean, I asked him, uh, well, how is it playing a harp all day long? And he says, we don't do that. And I says, oh? He says, no, the things we did on Earth that we enjoyed, that were good, like playing baseball, football, we still do that here. And, the games aren't fixed, but we have fun with what we do. And, just imagine how bad it would be if you just sat around throughout eternity playing a harp. And from time to time, we get to visit with our family. They may or may not be aware of us. They may not see us. Well, my daughter came from Vietnam. She actually got to see Bobby because they were staying here in this house, and he actually came to visit them. And her husband's concern was that the kids might see him. And he says, no. They're not going to see me. I just want to come and see how things were going.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the only night, to the best of my knowledge, that they actually had any experience. Then I had another friend of mine who was here sleeping. He works for the government. And I said, well, did you sleep okay last night? He says, oh, yeah. I says, of course, there was some noise and everything. And I got up and tried to find out what it was. And I finally realized that, it was just Bobby. And that was the name of my son. I said, oh? He says, yeah. So after that, I went back to bed, and I said, okay. Okay. But he hinted that he saw him, too. But they went ahead and had things like that. And there's things at this house that happens that are weird, too. But I had that. And even now, from time to time, Corona still visits. It's not like it was early on. But I think I have a friend of mine that he's even sensed Corona here. And a little piece of debris that I have, my friend got to see it, and he noticed that there were strange things about that debris. But, there's things that they bring up like that, and about traversable wormholes. The one thing you have to remember is that when they leave their planet, they have to be outside their atmosphere, and they go through the I think we call it the event horizon, where you enter into the traversable wormhole. And you exit, but when you exit, you have whatever planet you're coming to visit, it has to be outside of the atmosphere, or it can cause damage. Back in the 70s or 80s, I'm not sure which, they had one of their craft that exited the traversable wormhole inside of the atmosphere over Canada. And that caused damage over a 600-mile area. And the Canadian government was able to cover it up because they said that a transformer blew. And some people pointed out, well, they covered a wide area. And one of their spokespeople says, well, that's to be expected. This was a large transformer. But, in the documents I have, they make it clear that the cover story was, in fact, that it was a transformer that blew. They have no idea what it was that caused that. Well, we actually do know what caused it. But that happens, and sometimes normally it takes place over the northern poles, the North Pole or the South Pole, areas like that, so if an accident occurs and they enter inside of the atmosphere, damage is minimized. But if they are starting their exit, and you can see it because you'll look up and it's a clear sky, nothing's in the sky, and it's lovely at night. But you'll see like a little speck of light, and that little speck of light will grow and grow and grow and get to be about the size of a grape. Now, it can't get no bigger than that, because if it gets bigger than that, it's getting really, really close to the atmosphere and could enter the atmosphere by accident, and you don't want that to happen. Because, it's the world's loudest sonic boom, if you understand what I'm trying to say.
Let me ask you, first of all, and is the reason that there is no sonic boom because they are going enveloped in a gravitational field?
Oh, well, yeah, you're talking about when they're flying within our atmosphere.
Yes.
And they're doing 10, 12, 15,000 miles an hour and no sonic boom.
Yes.
They are actually, they have, a real thin, what do you call it? Do I say force field around their craft? But they're displacing space-time, which means they aren't flying a craft based on the aerodynamic soundness of the craft. Like if we are flying a plane, it has to be aerodynamically sound or it can't fly. They don't have to do that. So, anti-gravitation, that's a good term, because the whole situation is, by displacing that space-time, which is how they do it, they actually are creating a means of anti-gravitation, which means that the craft isn't going to fall to the ground because it's shaped like a rock or it's shaped like a cube and not aerodynamically sound. It's actually defying the gravitational pull of whatever environment it finds itself in.
Now, let me ask some pressing questions that I've had for quite some time. And as I've posted in the chat a long time ago, and let me just warn you too, when we come back after some of that break, I'll be able to have to give you soon before we get off from UPRN, that there's a lot of people who have questions that have been writing them since. Now, my questions are, first of all, let's talk about different species and what is their agendas of why they're here and how long have they been here. So that's pretty diverse questions, and I know they might be lengthy answers, but what can you say about that?
When I was in the military, I saw a book, and the book was a medical book. It was to tell you how to go ahead and deal with the various species that are visiting our planet. At that time, we had identified up to 57 different species.
Wow.
Now, there could be many more, but the book referred to 57 at that time. And it told you how to provide first aid in case you had injured visitors. You provided that first aid until you got the medical team. And I'll tell you right now, that medical team is flown out of Fort Belvoir. But I think they originate from somewhere in Washington, D.C.
No, I would think they have them all over the world in different...
Yeah, you can't do that. The best kept secrets in the world are those secrets that are known by but a few.
Interesting. Okay, of course, that makes sense.
But now, as far as the recovery teams, it's important you have two responding quick response forces that respond on a recovery. Your first response team has to be there within 3 hours. So that first team has to be close by to where they can go ahead and send them on out and have them there on the ground within 3 hours. They have up to 4 to 6 hours for the second team. So at any given time, you have anywhere from a team normally consists of about 20 personnel. When they have both of them there, you have approximately 40 personnel. But you can draw upon the resources of the nearest military installation. That's why a lot of times if the people are on the NBC quick response teams, then these people may have several different experiences in their lifetime in the course of their involvement in the NBC quick response teams. But remember, that's not their sole function. They get, you know, they get baptized in their first response to a craft not of this world landing or crashing here on this planet, and they're part of the recovery team now. But a lot of people, when you draw upon the resources of the nearest military installation, then you have those people who are involved in that one incident simply because they are people who are qualified to do specific missions to secure the site and help pick up all the debris and hopefully not leave any of the debris behind. And these people may be involved in only one incident, like there in Georgia. We had a guy that, after actually it was Paula Harris, God bless her. If it wasn't for her, I'd have never gotten the book out that we put out. Actually, she was the one that did all the legwork on the book dealing with my life story. With the death of my son, I was working on it at that time, but when he died, I just gave up on it. But she persisted. She kept coming here. She'd do recorded interviews and kept pressing and pressing and pressing. And she did a real good job on getting the book out. But the situation is that, and I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What was I talking about?
We were talking about, well, the questions that I had originally asked was about the agendas and the different types of species, which you said you were going through the different types of books.
The agendas of our visitors vary. Now, there are some visitors, they no longer visit us. They think we're a lost cause. But it's like, a childlike curiosity about all living things on this planet. And someday we're going to be the same way. Someday we're going to be someone else's UFOs. And I can tell you right now, if we get to that level of, and I don't like the term evolution, but I'm going to use it, evolution, that level of enlightenment, then we're not going to be a hostile species neither. Because you have to survive your technology. You have to grow with it spiritually. If you don't grow with your technology spiritually, ultimately at some point you fall victim to that technology. And many species that never got off the ground actually had that happen to them. They actually fell victim to their own technology. But if you survive that, and some scientists say, okay, in a million years from now, we're going to know everything and we're going to be laid back and we're not even going to be worried or even concerned about going out in space trying to find out anything. That's totally not true. That curiosity is always going to be there. And the question, is there an end to science? No, there's no end to science. If you can go ahead and use a yardstick for all the knowledge in the universe, our universes, our multiverses, if you can use a yardstick, 36 inches, and you compare where we're at right now, then it's less than 1/100th of 1 inch of all the knowledge there is yet to learn that we know.
Now, have you ever had glimpses into their worlds? I mean, because you were a telepath and an empath, and so you were able to communicate with them, and they, of course, shared emotions with you. Did they share, say, images of what it like to We'll
Oh,
see.
yeah, they did.
Oh, can you?
And the situation is, I tell people I have never been abducted, and to the best of my knowledge, I have never been abducted. But yet, I can, have flashbacks at the time that I see billions upon billions of stars in the heavens. And, it's like nowhere on Earth can you see a night sky like that. And I have no idea how to explain that. I've been in a lot of deserts where there's no lights or nothing to interfere with the stars you see in the heavens. And I mean, you have, in some areas you can see not just the sky littered, literally with thousands of stars, but nothing like. And there was one incident where there was an object that was falling, and it was making a whistling sound as it was falling. Well, in space, you're not supposed to be able to hear that. And that would be the same condition that I found, seeing all these stars. And I have no idea how to explain how I could hear that whistling. And whatever the object was, it was on fire, and it was falling through space. But I can't explain it. And like I said, there's a lot of things, and it goes along with experiences that you had too, that you have no explanation for. I mean, I have many questions of myself, of the events that I've had. I can remember when I was a kid, when I started to have all this happening, when I first saw Corona as he really looked.
And Corona was what year? You're talking about
That was
Corona
in
of Roswell.
1957. What's that?
Oh, okay. I was thinking Corona as in Roswell 47, as the crash of
Oh, no,
Corona,
no, no. This was
Friedman's
the
book.
one that's supposed to, as he puts it, he'll be around to mourn my death. Their lifespan is about 300 years.
Oh, interesting. You mean
But,
the Greys?
well, actually, he's kind of green.
Okay.
I'll try to send you a person from the Franklin Mint when they were here doing the replica of the UFO that crashed here in Roswell. There was me and a couple of other folks that was giving them some pointers on it. One of the people that visited me was a artist in their own right, and he worked with me for several hours trying to do a composite of Corona, and he did a real good job of it. Anyhow, he went ahead on the rough sketch he took. When he got back, he actually did a painting of it. Then he sent me a copy of it. And I mean, he's pretty much on the money of what Corona looks like. Now, you say, well, I'll send you a copy of that, and you look at that, and think of a 7-year-old boy being approached by something that looks this way. And it's almost like that person is chastising the 7-year-old boy. That's frightening, and it scares you. And when that happened, I ran all over the house trying to find a place to hide. And you couldn't hide. I remember jumping behind the couch, and Corona looked there, and what's wrong? Then I finally went between the sink and the refrigerator, and it was like this bony hand scratching on top of my head as though to say, you can run, but you can't hide. And I can remember crying, begging my mom and dad, take me to see a doctor, because a doctor can make the monsters go away. And, to me, I felt if I went to see a doctor, it just has to be in my head. It's just going to go, well, no, that didn't quite happen. Anyhow, I finally had to come to a conclusion at a very young age, which was hard, and it'd be hard for any kid to try to make this conclusion. I either had to accept what was going on in my life and try to learn from it, or if I resisted and I fought, it would be the means of my own destruction. And I always try to tell people who are having these experiences that that's a decision they have to make within themselves also, because it's either it's not going to go away, and there's no medicine or no doctor's cure for it, and the best trained psychologists, what they're going to do is say, well, you're just being lying to yourself. There's no premise for any type of medical or mental psychosis that can explain this. It's just that you're for whatever reason you're fabricating everything, which means they understand it's not something that is mentally wrong with you. But then again, be very careful, because if you're in the military, they have people in the military who are psychiatrists and psychologists that deal with mental illnesses in the military, that come across these people like myself, and it may be that the command, like in my situation, is trying to crucify that person. Then they will go ahead and they will sit down with, we can't tell you what to do. All we can do is tell you you're not crazy. And if I was you, I'd put in a request for transfer and try to pick up the pieces and carry on my life once I got that transfer. Now, the reason I know that, I ran into one of those psychologists when the military was doing what they were doing to me here. And I was sent for psychological evaluation. And the psychologist that was giving me all these tests, he went and talked to the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, I firmly believe that he knew of these events and had dealt with other people before. He even told me, you're not the first. I don't believe you're going to be the last. But the whole situation is, you have to learn to deal with it, and you got to move on with your life. These other people aren't going to understand. Well, ultimately, I thought I'd be the one getting the short end of the stick. But what happened is that eventually they relieved me of my duties.
Mm-hmm.
They tried to force my retirement, and I thought, you know what? I'm going to retire, because then I'll be right, because I'm going to fight this to hell and back if I have to. Well, they pulled the retirement and sent me to Germany. But I went ahead and, well, they wouldn't let me have leave where I could go back home or anything. The day before I was to catch the plane to go to Germany, that's when they went ahead and released me. Now I couldn't get leave. I had requested a 2-week leave. When I got to Germany, they went ahead and granted me a 2-week leave. Well, I'm in Germany now. What good is it going to do me? So I sent it back to them, and I told them exactly what they could do with it, which I'm not going to repeat this time. But the whole situation is, I was reinstated. I got a good EER, and I mean, I was given an EER, a relief for cause EER, but now with the people who was doing all this to me, they were relieved of duty, and I was reinstated in my duties. And at the end of the service, when I was getting ready to leave, I went ahead and I was awarded what's called the Meritorious Service Medal for service. That's one of the highest peacetime awards you can get. And to the best of my knowledge, for the first time in history, that happened. And what I think makes it so unique is that it involved a situation with a person who, no matter how you slice it or dice it, was heavily involved in UFOs and the UFO phenomenon and the UFO mystery that ultimately will have a great impact on this planet. We're living in a time where great things are about to come about. And one of those great things is going to be the ultimate release of the knowledge that we're not alone in the universe, and that they're not to be something that we are to be afraid of, but something that we can learn from. And we're going to have that interaction with our visitors.
When is the key right there. And I'll leave that as the last question so you could take your break after that.
Okay, sir.
When will we have interaction finally? I mean I've waited 35 years.
Well, I hope I live to see it, but I may not. But the whole situation is I have sure knowledge it's going to happen. And as I said, there are many, many, many things that I don't have the answers to.
Yeah, you did. And you know what? It's absolutely fair to say you don't know the answer. If you don't have the answer, you don't. So, and Mr. Sergeant Stone, do you want to take your break?
Okay.
Do you want me to call you back in, say, 5 minutes? Would that be enough?
Sure, that'd be fine.
Okay, I will call you right back. We'll be back live. I'll stay live on air with everybody, but I will let you go, Sergeant Stone, and we'll be right back with you in 5 minutes.
Okay, sir. God bless.
God bless you. Thank you. All right, folks. Well, hey, that was, of course, Clifford Stone. That was pretty darn cool. And coming up, I got a special hour secured just for you folks right here on YouTube. Those people who are subscribers on Patreon and also on our archives, you also get a chance to have this free, and you could also get it free of ads that way. Now, let me, what I'm talking about when you want to re-listen to it right now, you're getting ad free because I've never really hit the ad button, and I'd like to test that one day just to see how long of an ad there is so I can use it for breaks here and there. Now, hey, real quick, okay, I wanted to give a book away today. It's called Not From Here. It's Preston Dennett's 24th book. And as you folks know, I've done a lot of UFO reading on this topic, specifically about UFOs. I mean, everything interests me, paranormal and everything, but really it was something about UFOs that always dominated me from literally age 4, 1984, and 35 years ago. So I read a lot. And Preston Dennett's book, UFOs over California, changed my life. And I also found it that I loved his research. He really got the nitty gritty of every single detail and the best ones. I mean, his other book that's a top seller right now, Inside UFOs. I mean, think about that. Knowing what it's like to be an abductee and the whole event beginning to end from being into the craft and what's going on, it's all that. But not from here. It's got a fascinating stuff. Here, I will read you the back. The evidence is undeniable. Extraterrestrials are visiting our planet. Now, researcher Preston Dennett continues his exploration of the weirder and more unusual aspects of UFO encounters. As with the first two volumes of Not From Here, the latest volume delves deep into the heart of UFO phenomenon, revealing startling new insights with cases from across the United States and the world. Starting from early history to the present day, this book expands our knowledge of these strange visitors and to our planet. And by the way, I tell you, it's a fantastic read because I have myself read it. Now, I was going to give it to any of the subscribers or awesome people here on YouTube, or even the person who was the furthest away, which I see is Denmark. But we got a cool super chat donation, so I wanted to say, if Lars Saturn, you do want this book, please do let me know. If not, I will pass it on to somebody else. But whoever does get it, just keep in mind I am extremely busy, and you may have to stay up on me. But I promise you, it's coming to you. It's absolutely for you. I was with Preston yesterday, and I did get a bunch of books from him that I wanted to give away to you folks. Now, I do have, for times of having no guest, I always have stacks of Open Minds magazines talking about old cases. I also have this really cool book of quotes. I've never used it before. So now this one is ironic because it's just the first page I flipped it to, and I think it actually summarizes how I feel about AOC and MAGA country, Donald J. Trump right now. Capitalism and capitalism alone has rescued the human race from degrading poverty, rampant sickness, and early death. Amen. Yeah, socialism. The movie doesn't end well, folks. Keep that in mind. All right, let's grab you another quote. What both the left and the right overlook is our founders' wisdom about the limits and dangers of government. That was by Edward H. Crane. I couldn't pronounce the other person, so I just bypassed that. Okay. All right, here. All right, let's see here. I'd like to read them before I say them to you. Oh, here we go. Socialists demanded the use of force in order to substitute their own inclinations for those of the human race. Frederick Bastiat. Anyway, very interesting. Okay, let me give some shout outs to some recent subscribers of the archives, which literally just came in. So let me say, we have Wendy Surgru, I hope I said that right, Erica Elliott, Kristen Stefan, Laura Sutton, Tanisa Men, Ralph R. Moore, Pamela Bauer, Miguel Perez, Carol Bibliowicz, Michael Hall, PhD, Dorothy Chandler. Thank you all. And of course, sorry about that. I'm not going to take that. That is a friend calling me on air. But no, I figured one day if you guys want, we'll do some prank calling and just call random people on air. But I think that's kind of mean. You can't. I mean, first of all, if you call a random number, just I could tell you legally wise, and you're recording them without consent, you could pretty much get in trouble. Especially if it's not. This is more than recording. You're broadcasting, okay? So yeah, that'd definitely be an invasion of privacy if you didn't have consent. Anyway, so let's give Clifford Stone another minute or so. I haven't looked at the chat yet, so remember, I mean, I've been looking at it through the entire show. Don't get me wrong, but I do have to watch the stream. I obviously am communicating with other people, so believe me, this is a multi-tasked event that's going on every single time I put on a show. So it's always much harder, folks, than it seems. But hey, it's fun and rewarding. I get to learn some really cool shit all the time, and this is exactly what I've been asked. I mean, looking to ask these people, and if you guys really want to know, until I bring him back on, the whole reason how this whole ended up. This was by accident. I should be, suing people and defending people in court, grinding away as a lawyer. And I went to Conscious Life Expo in 2012, and so I had paid for the extra workshops, as they're called, to see lectures by people that I had known on TV and from everything I'd researched. So, of course, there's Linda Moulton Howe and Travis Walton and Roger Lear and Yvonne Smith, and I'm like, holy crap. I've seen these people on TV and documentaries that nobody else would recognize, but to me they're like gods. They've seen stuff or they know stuff. And so I stood in line after Travis Walton's lecture, which was no different than anything else I'd always watched, but hey, I'd finally seen it firsthand, and I got to ask a question. So I stayed in line and got to ask a question, and I said, Travis, you've been abducted in 1975. And I do know that most people who have been taken are taken more than once throughout their life. Have you ever been taken again? His answer was no. Next. And that was frustrating. Now, somehow, throughout meeting these people, I did come, after meeting them, stayed in contact with them. By no means of what I was going to do. Then a strange event happened with Third Phase and Moon that got me sucked to working with them, and then they needed me to put them in touch with some of these people, and ironically, they asked me to write them the questions because they didn't really know these people, and I had been researching them and read all their books and had amazing questions that I wanted to know. And then it turns out one day that they couldn't do it, so they just asked if I could do them. And then they realized that I'm pretty darn good at asking questions on the fly, and that's how I ended up becoming a radio host. So this is totally by accident. I'm actually excited as to how many people are in this chat, so let me take a look at the chat. Who wants the book? Well, is anyone going to tell me? Otherwise, I'll just save it here for next time. That's cool. Right here. Ben Trotman, straight here from the UK. Thank you very much. And Lars Saturn, again, I really do appreciate you for your support. And do you want the book? I do want to give it to you, Lars. I'd like to give it to Lars, and I'd like to get some out to people who are in other countries like you in the UK, and also the other person whose name I don't have in front of me from Denmark. That's pretty cool. I have always liked to keep track of the countries, but I can tell you this, because of the extreme amount and diverse topics that I do on this show, from politics to global warming, if you believe in it. Unfortunately, I haven't touched flat Earth yet, but I will get to that soon enough. Even though I may not believe in everything I talk about or hear from guests, but that doesn't mean I'm not open to allow them to speak, especially for you guys and gals to interact with them. That's what this is really all about. It comes out for you because I'm trying to be proactive. I was a passive researcher for, over almost 30 years, 28 years really, until I decided to be proactive and share information with you. That's what I figure. Hey, if I'm asking these questions that I've had lifelong and still continue to this day come up with more answers, questions, then if you guys enjoy the questions and the answers, well then why the heck not share them with you? So that is exactly what we're doing. Okay. I haven't. Oh, Princess wants a book. Okay. And in Canada. Yeah, there you are. I didn't know, Lasha. You are in Canada. If Lars says he doesn't want it, I will absolutely give it to you, Lasha. Lasha, you know how to contact me, or Josh. Just make sure you get your mailing address and stay on it to make sure that I actually leave it. But I promise you, it is right here for you. Lasha Senyek, everybody. Okay, let's bring back our guest, Sergeant Clifford Stone, who I do want to thank for his service to the United States, as he is a Vietnam vet. U.S. Army career, 22 years in the CBS, I believe he said, which was the chemical, biological, and I don't know what the S stood for. Maybe you guys remember. Unit that responded. That was the cover that he told his family. But as you know, what a perfect, because it's really more than a cover, it's true, right? Just like when they had the R&D for Philip Corso, when he said that it was not non American technology, he wasn't lying. It wasn't Soviet either, but they didn't ask, is it from, the Soviet Union or from East Berlin? They never asked that when IBM received the chip, or different companies received actual alien artifacts as told by Philip Corso. Then, when he said that they were, from non-US, they foreign. No one asked why. So I guess this totally works with Clifford. Okay, let's see here. Here's his number. I don't want to say that on air because I don't want the poor guy to get bombarded. Considering, like I said, I've been waiting to talk to him for 18 years. And today it's happened, but it turns out he's a really cool guy, as I've been talking to him for the days leading up today, and it seems we're fast friends. He's actually invited me already to, as you could see, he said that on the air, to New Mexico, so I will do a live stream when I get there. All right, let's dial him up and see what we can grab of Clifford Stone. Let's see if he's ready for us. No answer yet. All right, Clifford. We'll give you another minute, my friend. Let's make sure I got that number in there properly. Yep, it's right. Oh, no, hold on a second. I made a 2 that I wrote down. Unfortunately, I'm a terrible handwriter. Better typer. Unfortunately, I snapped my pinky off back in September, and it healed wrong. So it's sticking out at a 30-degree angle, sometimes a little more, and I used to be able to type verbatim. So to lose that ability sucks. when I first became or had lost my ulnar nerve, the feeling in my left elbow to my pinky, people ask me what does it feel like. I'm like, it's pretty great. You don't get to feel if you burn or whatever. But no, it turns out I regret saying that because I might have cursed myself to actually getting to the point of now snapping it off. And no, I wish I didn't do that because now I can't skydive yet because I will get stuck, my hand stuck in the toggles. So more on Clifford Stone and ET retrievals. Let's try dialing him again. Sergeant Clifford Stone, everybody. United States Army, 22-year career. Come on, Clifford. Let's see here. I could try him from my cell phones.
The number you are calling does not accept unidentified calls.
Unbelievable. Let's get him to call me. I don't even know why it's unidentified coming from here. Pretty screwed up, folks, but don't worry. He is ready to do this. So, Clifford Stone. Clifford. Okay, hang tight for you. Clifford, dear friend. I'm having trouble calling your number, and I got lots of people waiting for your questions. Is it possible that you can call me? Call this the number I have here, which I will actually post up for everybody. Which let me get it to you. It's 818. No problem. Get something right with, and here it is for everybody. I'm asking people that if they do call, to limit to one question while on the call until we get through as many people as possible, and if we can get more after, even better. Plus, there's a lot in chat, so people are excited. And just so you know, folks, he has cleared the entire evening for us all. So hang tight. I'm giving him the number one more time. 818-491-3348. 334. Uh-huh. Okay, thanks again. All right, folks. He's calling me back. Let's make sure I can get him on this. That's pretty shame that they blocked my 818 number without telling me. Come on, Mr. Clifford Stone. So, yeah, I mean, this blows my mind, and you know I'm going to have to bring him back because I probably could go, if combined, probably a week of interviews with him and still have questions. I mean, I want to know every detail about these planets they're on and things like that. Like, wow, holy crap. You know, how does that work? Let me try something while I'm waiting for him. I'm going to see, since it said that I couldn't get him in as a blocked number, will this let me dial star 82? Remember that old days? The old star 69 deal? Yeah. Come on, Clifford. Waiting for you, bud. Oh, let me see if I have to give him a call again from my cell phone and see what is going on with him calling me here. Let's try calling him again. Okay. I'm trying him on my end again real quick for you folks just to see if there's something I can in fact do.
The number you are calling does not accept unidentified calls.
Let me
If you
unblock
are
it.
a solicitor, please hang up now. Otherwise, please enter the 10-digit telephone number you are calling from.
entered.
I'm sorry, this mailbox has not yet been set up by the subscriber.
My
Please
gosh.
try again later. Goodbye.
Hold on, folks. Let me call him again and find out what's going on. Don't worry, he is available. He's cleared his evening for us, so. Does his phone die? That would suck, wouldn't it? Wow, it does sound like it. And yeah, he is available. If you notice, I did call him. He gave him the call-in number for us. Let's see again if I can call him. Now, what I could do, if you guys want, you can call. You can talk about whatever you want. And I will have to reschedule him for you to talk. Now, I really meant for you guys to start talking to him a little earlier, but he really wanted to talk about these documents. And I had to sort of sit on the questions that I had talked to him that I really, really wanted to get answered until quite some time. So I do want to apologize to you folks. Let's keep trying him again here because each time I'm calling, it's sounding like his phone is dead, unfortunately, which would be very, very disappointing. Yeah, it's going straight to voicemail. And no, believe me, I'm at least since I've got to know him in the last leading up to the show, he is a very honest guy and he loves to chat on the phone and he wants to tell his story. So no, he is not disappearing for this. He was absolutely looking forward to having more time with you guys. And he had his break. He was ready. Ooh, let's see if we got some luck. Sergeant Stone, are you having issues calling? Okay, let me try calling you. Do you have call waiting? You don't have call waiting. Okay, hang up and let me try calling you again one more time by seeing if I can unblock the number. If not, we'll figure it out because that is the right number I gave you to call. Okay? Okay, I'll call you right back. Thanks. All right, folks. Let's make sure here you guys even are here. Yeah, you are. Okay, let's call him again. All right. All right, call. I'm not a solicitor, so let me dial my...
The number you are calling does not accept unidentified calls. If you are a solicitor, please hang up now. Please try again.
10
The number
digit.
you are calling does not accept unidentified calls. If you are a solicitor, please hang up now. To automatically unblock your name and number for this call only and complete the call, press 1. To enter the telephone number...
Thank God.
Hello?
Sergeant Stone. Thank you. All right, we got you back. Okay, now let's go to the questions. Now, I'm going to start reading them, but if anyone wants to call, let me change for you the call-in number here. That way you guys have a chance to interact with him. Of the two call-in numbers, please use just the main line, which is my direct line. The UPRN station number is no longer on because we are not on UPRN for this after show. Okay, this comes from Lasha Senyak. No, actually from Frankie Zomboy is the first question. Why would be worse than aliens visiting Earth? The second coming? Or what would be worse than aliens visiting Earth? That's a very interesting question. What would you say to that, Sergeant Stone?
What would be worse than the aliens visiting us?
Yeah, I think it's a hypothetical question, but that's a very interesting question to pose.
Well, I think that something worse than aliens visiting us is them being spectators to the apocalypse asteroid crashing into the Earth.
Okay, let's see what else I got here, because there's a lot here. If anyone wants to rewrite them so it makes it easier for me to find, even better. If not, I'll just go back in order and see here. Okay. Okay, we got 70 people, so we got a lot of comments here. I'm looking for the first question. I'm going reading back in order, unless someone typed one here. Let's see here. I know I asked people to wait till the end, so people stopped writing them as they were going through, and that's my fault for having them. Okay. Danny Barnaby. Dr. Stephen Greer believes we can contact them, meaning ETs, through some sort of meditation. Do you believe the same?
With all due respect to Dr. Greer,
Yes.
I believe that, they have to want to really communicate with you. Now, with that being said, do I believe that meditation can go ahead and help open up the mind to where it's more accessible to our visitors? Because they actually, telepathy is the best word I can use. But as far as you being able to just go and communicate with them because you want to communicate with them, I don't think that's necessarily the case. I say that from my point of view, and once again, it's my point of view. I could be 100% wrong, but I don't think I am in this case. I have told a lot of people, they choose you, you don't choose them.
Here's an interesting question that Lasha Senyak asks, and I think it's actually really interesting too for my own thing because something I wanted to ask. What do you think do you think the military thought that Hitler had contact with the alien crafts? And the reason I would have asked that is because of the alleged Black Forest 1936 crash.
I think that Hitler and his cohorts knew of our visitors, and possible. I'll carry it one step forward. They actually got technology from our visitors, and that technology gave them a head start on rocketry. Now, they had great scientists that was working on rocketry all the way back in the 30s.
Yeah, Werner von Braun being one, right?
Absolutely. With the advent of V1, it wasn't all that great of a weapon, but now with the V2, it was very accurate at hitting targets in the British Isles and being very much on target, missing, ground zero within maybe 50 feet or so. The V3 that they were working on, which we didn't get too far, we didn't actually accomplish any more success than the Germans did. That would have been a very interesting craft. As a matter of fact, it was used for the advent of other craft in a classified program in which we were trying to produce craft that we could fly into space, and this is in the late 50s into the early 60s, that could go outside of the atmosphere and travel at speeds of up to 10,000 miles an hour. And
now,
yes, I had those documents.
I was going to say, have we succeeded in that?
We may have, but we just haven't told the public.
Okay. All right.
I mean, the Army, under Project Horizon, was working to where they would have a means of getting to the moon by 1960. By June of 1963, they were going to establish a 12-man permanent moon base on the moon. But it was because of disagreements between them, NASA, Air Force, and the Army that it didn't happen. But the craft that they worked on, I can even show you drawings on that classified program where they were trying to work on them. Also, we had to come up with a whole range of new weapons, and we were working on those because we figured once we established the moon base and when we'd go ahead and probably try to do it on other planets, that we would have at some point a means or a necessity to defend ourselves against possible Russian troops trying to establish bases on the moon and other planets, are some outside threat. They stopped short of saying some hostile alien entities that might come up and disagree with us doing what we were doing.
Okay, here's some more questions for you. Did Betty and Barney Hill say they saw a Nazi uniform on the craft of their abduction?
I studied that case immensely, and I've never, ever heard that. And the one thing that I think is a lot of times people want to go ahead and put their spin on certain things. Just like I recently heard that Barney and Betty Hill was not an interracial couple. Yes. Just like my wife and I, my wife's Vietnamese, I'm white Anglo-Saxon, I guess you'd say. We are an interracial couple. But, you know, the whole situation is, and the reason they found Barney and Betty Hill interesting was because of that. The other thing is, they had a hard time understanding why Barney's teeth would come out and Betty's didn't. She actually bit one because they were trying to pull her teeth out. And they asked for an explanation. Why does his come out and hers doesn't? And to show you about their compassion, one of the ETs that was trying to go ahead and keep Betty Hill calm, telling her once they have accomplished what they wish to accomplish, that both her and her husband would be released. And she was still, you know, very upset, very scared. And she said, no, if I get out of here, people are going to want me to prove that this happened. Then the one that's being very friendly toward her, you know, when she asked that she saw this book lying on a table, very strange, very unique. And she says, I want to take that book with me. And the entity says, okay, when we're done, you can take that book with you. The entity that seemed to be in charge got very angry with the one that's being friendly to Betty and chastised him greatly, saying, no, nothing. They cannot take nothing, not that book or anything else. Once they leave here, they'll have no memory of what happened here. And they cannot go ahead, take anything that could prove the validity of the events that are taking place right now. But I've never heard about a Nazi. Well, bottom line, somebody could have seen something, because back in the time of the Buddha and all that, and there's at the Buddha temples, they have a, what do you call it, a swastika, but it's reverse is what the Nazis had. And they've been visiting us long before the first bipedal creature walked upon this planet.
Were they instrumental in creating us?
I don't think so. Because when you go ahead and ask, does God exist? They will tell you that which you call God exists, but they cannot tell you which religion is true and correct. And also I found out something else, that it's not religion you should be concerned about. It's your faith. And I understand now there is a difference between religion and faith. Also, they will try to correct you when you say, well, you know, you're vastly superior to us. You understand genetics more than us. Are you sure you really didn't have a part to play in the creation of the human species? Then they'll go ahead and tell you, once again, the same God that created you created us. And if you do not accept that answer, then you must ask yourself, if we created you, who created us? And that, you know, that's all encompassing, all the species that are out there, all intelligent life. So, you know, that's a question that I've never gotten a direct response to, but I definitely ask about the existence of God, and of course that tied in with my son passing. And I was very concerned about people coming out and saying that the entities eat the soul. So when people die and their soul starts to go towards the light, you should try to avoid going into the light. That's nonsense.
Yeah, that's actually John Lears did say that, but he ended up taking that back. Now, let me say this publicly for all those who are writing questions. If those of you who have written questions throughout, which I never had a chance to ask earlier on, if you want to rewrite them, that would be great. That would make it easier for me to find them at the bottom. And try to keep it one question each until at least I get through everybody's. That way, then if I can get through any after that would be great. But I can't keep this on for the whole night because obviously Sergeant Stone has to at some time get some rest, as do I. So, okay, here is another one. When no. So many people believe in ET, but the biggest argument from the non-believers is that there is no photo evidence from civilians. Actually, I think that they believe there's no evidence of other kind. But is this because of the speed of these ET?
Actually, there is photographic evidence.
Yeah,
I'm not a photographic expert, but I mean, just like the NRO, they took film footage, high definition. They had the best cameras in the world. As a matter of fact, when they were going to go ahead and start Apollo flights to the moon, NASA asked for funding to develop a camera that they could use to go ahead and take pictures of the moon to decide the best area in which to land. The NRO gave them some of their older cameras and says, well, we've been studying these. Why don't you try some of these? Then they found a camera that worked great for them, but that camera was obsolete to the cameras that the NRO was using. Once again, I reiterate, the NRO took photographs of unidentified flying objects, by the true definition of what the Air Force was calling unidentified flying objects at the time, which means they were some type of craft under intelligent control. They stopped short of saying they were interplanetary. But we didn't put those UFOs out there in space. The Russians didn't put those UFOs out there in space, nor did any other nation on the face of this planet. Those photographs have yet to be released. There exists gun camera footage of UFOs, which to date have not been released, even though they are acknowledged in many of the UFO files in which they were taken. And there are private citizens who have taken photos of UFOs and pictures of UFOs. Today you have to be more careful because they have Photoshop. But the whole situation is there are genuine photos that we know of. I give you the Utah films from 1950, I think, and the Montana films. And these were evaluated by the Office of Naval Interpretation, Photo Interpretation, and they concluded these were real objects. They were self-illuminating, and when the Robinson panel met, the people who sat around and drank coffee and smoked cigarettes and cigars, that they had to go ahead and dispel any belief of any possibility of any UFO being interplanetary. All those are geese of some sort or birds of some sort, and they couldn't go along with the Office of Naval Photo Interpretation. So no, I mean, those people who spent thousands of hours trying to evaluate what was on those films. So no, I mean, the Robinson panel was full of hooey. They had an agenda to go ahead and discredit UFO sightings, and they did that job superbly.
Okay, let me get a few more because Sergeant Stone, I'm going to end this in about 25 minutes. Why are you allowed to speak freely, and why do you think you have been allowed to speak without censorship?
Like I said, they tried to censor me. They tried to court-martial me. They tried to go ahead and, I mean, I felt like the person out on a long, long limb all by themselves when I was going through that 8+ months of hell. But I fought back. And come hell or high water, I decided at that time that people had the right to know the truth, and that no matter what happened to me, I had a moral obligation and a moral duty to start talking out about what I knew and what I know, and do this not for the people who disbelieve or, oh, that's a bunch of baloney. No. It's for the people who've had experiences that until the day they had that experience, they were non-believers too. But once you have that experience, you become a believer. And if you have no support group, then it really affects you. I mean, it can be deteriorating on your life. It can be a horrible situation in your life. So I'm trying to tell people, these things happen. How you deal with it, it's important on how you decide on how you want to deal with it. But there are other people out there you can talk to. And right now, that's my whole purpose in talking, to let those that are still searching for answers, who thought they were all alone, to let them know you're not alone. Literally, thousands of people have had these experiences.
Now, about the Montana film, where can people find it?
Actually, they can come here and I'll show it to them. On Facebook, they actually have both those films on YouTube.
If aliens could get one question answered absolutely truthfully from us, what would you think they would ask?
Speculation on my part, okay? But I would think that in all probability, they would be wondering why we cannot come together as recognizing the human species as the highest intelligent life on this planet, and recognizing ourselves not as many, many, many different races, but we all make up one race on this planet, and that would be the human race. Right now, we go and see people. There's the blacks, and then there's the Chinese, and then there's the Middle Easterners, and we separate ourselves by these ethnicities within the cultures of race. And the situation is, we are a byproduct of the environment that we find ourselves in, and that includes the color of our skin.
Well, it's also, as Reagan said, that if we were ever faced from a threat, I think even just actually people knowing that we are not alone, then people would probably end their differences, as Reagan said, between us, and look at us as humans as opposed to inhabitants of certain regions of Earth.
Absolutely, and I'll tell you right now, his son would disagree with me, but I think that for whatever reason his son does know. Reagan knew the truth. Reagan was briefed.
Now,
when they watched the what was it, the Independence Day, he talked to a couple people there and says, there's only several of us in this room that really know the truth. He knew it, and he was briefed. I know he was briefed because I was in Germany at the time, and I was actually trying to get a top secret clearance because there was a job I wanted. Mm-hmm. And our SPO
you didn't have any clearance relating.
Oh, I had a clearance, but see, if I put in for a clearance, I would realize that, whoa, no one told me that I had a clearance, but I had that secret clearance. And I'll tell you something else. Every 5 years, you have to renew that clearance.
Is it a Q clearance, as people say?
What's that?
Is it Q clearance, as people say, like Bob Lazar?
Oh, well, Q clearance, yeah, but Q clearance goes with nuclear weapons and stuff of this sort. But the whole situation is, yeah, you have the Q clearance. But see, with me, I had that secret clearance, and they did not want me to know I had it. It wouldn't be until 1987 that I found out I had that clearance. And also, the, dare I say, the DIA was the one that released it to the Army Security Agency. That, well, yeah, he's got that. Because I asked, what kind of information do you have about my involvement with UFOs? And the only thing they did, they came back, well, we know of this secret clearance. One, I never knew I had it until that time when they acknowledged that I had it. Two, you have to renew it every 5 years. I never had to renew it, and they didn't even want me to put it in for a security clearance because it would surface. When I got here to Roswell, and I was working there at NEMI, they pulled that secret clearance because I didn't have a need for a clearance. They pulled it 2 weeks later. I had the secret clearance back, and it was established at that time. It was never pulled, and it is not to be pulled. But I wouldn't find this out until '87. So the whole situation is these things that shouldn't have happened, and I have documentation back me up because I use the Privacy Act to try to gather as much information on what was happening to me at the time it was happening, so I'd have it for future reference, and I have that.
Now, okay, here's another one. Let me go back because Mars wanted his asked. I'm going to read it directly. I don't know if I quite understand it directly. He says, the Mad Martian asks if they connect any of these realities to Mars.
Now, what is it?
Okay, do they connect any of these reality to Mars?
Well, I'll tell you that what I really believe. I believe our visitors have staging areas on planets. I believe that they may even have staging areas on Mars. And I believe ultimately we are going to find life that is unique to Mars. I don't know whether it's going to be intelligent or not. I believe there is life that originated on Mars and is still there. I believe that some of our visitors actually have staging areas there on the moon. And if we have any people there on the moon, like a lot of people suggest, that we have people there in colonies, I would suggest that we are there at their invitation, and they chose the ones that would go there.
Now, Clifford, or Sergeant Stone, we do have Blake and Brent Cousins brothers, Third Phase of Moon, one of the largest UFO YouTube channels, with over 750,000 subscribers, on the air with us. Blake, Brent, you with us?
Yeah, how you doing, John? Hey, thanks for having us, and a good show, and having Mr. Stone on. A lot of knowledge going on tonight. One thing that I think Mr. Stone was mistaken about the movie Independence Day with Ronald Reagan. I think that was back during the day when Spielberg did a screening at the White House with for E.T., the movie. But we'll move along on that. What my question is, now that Julian Assange is basically behind bars, they took him down last night, there's going to be a lot of, in my opinion, some kind of mother load of information that's just going to be released. He's like all hands on deck. He's in jail. He might as well get it out. What do you think he knows about what you've been involved with?
I think he has some classified information that he tried to get out, but it didn't get out. And I'd love to talk to him and see what he does have. But I've heard stories that he did have information. I don't know anything firsthand, but I heard he did. But also, what a lot of people don't know, him being indicted was by accident, because it was several years back. By accident, they hit up on him, according to what I've read. And yeah, I try to keep up on that. I kept looking for that, and also I can remember the guy who went ahead and with all the documents that he took out of the NSA. I think he even had some documents. But the one thing, I don't care. I'm going to be taught, and maybe that's some of the things that protects me. But when I've had people come up and threaten me, I always tell them, you get the first shot, but you make that first shot count. And I have weapons for my own protection, and I have other means for my own protection. But the situation is, I do know that they will go ahead and they will threaten you. There's a possibility. I know situations which I don't want to believe our country ever murdered anybody. But here again, I do know that in the 50s and the 60s, they had death squads. And it was the CIA that directed these. And I do know that we went ahead with the mind control drugs and stuff of this sort. We had people that we administered drugs to, and they died as a result. This information is just coming out. Within the Army had a remote viewing organization that was known as Center Lane. And most people don't even know that Center Lane ever existed. Part of Center Lane was actually to try to go ahead and remote view alien bases on other planets other than here on planet Earth. And these documents have been released. It's just a lot of people don't know where to find them, but they are on the CREST general files in the CIA reading room, if I can call it that. But no, I don't know whether he knows anything, but in my own opinion, yes, he does. And he may have the situation where he just doesn't know how to go ahead and release it, but at the same time, I think he's also aware of the documents, and he probably didn't have to search for those like I did, where people were doing things, the CIA wasn't happy, so the CIA went ahead and essentially put a contract out on them to have him killed. Even here in the United States, that happened.
I've actually heard it happen to a lot of, not just people that were involved that were talking it, even journalists that seem to have stumbled upon the truth.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And like I say, I don't want to believe my country did, but the CIA documents that have been released, I have no choice but to know they're telling the truth, that those documents are genuine. And like I say, history as we know it is a lie. Because history as we know it is only what the government wants us to know and what they do to condition us to believe. And, I hate the terms conspiracy theorist. And, I know there's a lot of people out there, and people say the same thing about me. I'm talking a whole lot of hooey. I try to go ahead and divert away from my experiences and dig and get the documents that show these things were going on. And I think that the proof is in the pudding. In these documents, that's the pudding, and the proof is there.
We got Blake and Brent back on for another question. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah, as far as the launch today, or basically the attempt to land their robot on the moon, the Israelis basically had a major failure just moments before the success. And then all of a sudden, the thing lost contact and the mission was done. Do you think maybe because of the base on the dark side of the moon or possible alien existence on the moon may have had something to do with that malfunction?
My personal opinion, yes, I believe that. Do I have inside knowledge of it? No. But yes, I do believe that, because the whole situation is, make no mistake, our visitors are not hostile. Our visitors are not happy with, and we still have that mindset of putting bases on the moon, not for pure peaceable exploration of the cosmos, but to actually put them there for military use. And I think our visitors oppose this greatly. Now, we talk about the dark side of the moon. People say that it's never been photographed. Yes, it has. The Russians did that, and I think it was with Luna 9 that they did it. NASA put out a very good publication, which they no longer have, but I got a copy, thank God, which I got from one of the universities, of the lights that have been seen on the moon since the 14th century. And it makes for very good reading. And we can't explain what those lights are. And that document, if you ever hear, I'll give you a PDF copy. And like I say, I want people, if they get copies, I want them to make copies, because this document most people have never ever seen about where the dark side of the moon was photographed, and also the NASA document that talks about these anomalous lights that are seen on the moon. And people have been observing these since the 14th century. And they go back and they state that, the publication makes it clear that they could have a whole lot more of sightings that were reported, but they only included the sightings that had been confirmed by reputable people, reputable astronomers at the time. So, good example in today's world of that being the case, Dr. Menzel. Menzel was the great debunker of early years of UFOs. Menzel was working on the Project Twinkle project, the green fireball phenomenon. He was up there close to Alamogordo, and on the mountainside he saw 2 UFOs. And he went ahead, he saw them, they were about the size of the moon. And he went ahead and he made it clear, to justify that he's not like us other, lowlifes. He's a scientist. So he was better trained at what he could see, and he was better qualified in the way he was reporting it. He didn't report it to Blue Book. He reported it to the Air Force's OSI, which was in charge of Project Twinkle. And it would not be until 1975, when the OSI documents dealing with UFOs and Project Twinkle was transferred to the National Archives, that those documents would ever surface. And fools like me wait for the opportunity when they get these documents in, show me what you got, just like the ghost rockets. The same thing. People think that the president was never briefed. The president was briefed on ghost rockets all the way back in 1946.
Blake and Brent, you got another question?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting, recently, there's programs out there for editing, Adobe Premiere and Adobe After Effects, and I'm thinking, and I want to get your thoughts as well, Mr. Stone, this new software that has been recently given to the public is an update that basically, if you have something in your camera, in your video, that you don't want in the shot, you're now able to simply do some quick editing and tracking. In a matter of moments, you can make that object disappear. So, in my opinion, we haven't really had any satellites broadcast from the dark side of the moon, but recently they have visited behind it. China was broadcasting some video of the dark side. It turned out to be not so dark, but it could be nowadays easily done with a simple editing tool to smudge out, not actually smudge, but basically make moon base disappear before our eyes. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. And the one thing I want to point out, that they say it's because of funding, but all the way back in the late 50s into the early 60s, we had the technology to take a group of people to the moon. We had the technology to establish living quarters there where we could be there on the moon. But, we say, oh, well, funding, that's why we didn't do it. At that time, funding was unlimited. If they wanted to do it, they could have done it because of the national defense spending and budget. So the whole situation is, I sit back and I know now the technology that existed, because the classified documents are becoming unclassified. There's still a whole lot of areas that are blacked out, but the whole situation is that information is out there. They don't want people to know that they can get it, that it's no longer classified, and you have to search for it. And I spend a lot of my day, since I'm retired, looking for and I'll use various code words, and I come up with some of the weirdest things. But the whole situation is that, yeah, there's a whole lot of documentation that talks about things that we could have done, about the technologies that today would be marvelous. But they had the technology all the way back in the late 50s and the early 60s. Now, what happened? Did we just go ahead and decide we're going to drop this technology? I don't think so. I think it's quite possible that we have technology. Well, we say all the time the technology as we know it today, there's something out there that's 50 years ahead of its time. If you go over Air Force 2025, the volumes in that, and read what they're saying, that where we will be in the year 2025 as far as technology and in space and all this, and also Vision 2020, you find out that these are things where we should be in the year 2020 and 2025. We've already been there. We already had that technology back in the 50s, the late 50s, the early 60s. So no, there's technology that we have yet to acknowledge and let the American public know. And that's always, the need to keep it classified because of national security. We have documents that talk about certain things that go all the way back to the late 40s, dealing with UFOs nonetheless, in which there is still renegade information that's blotted out in those documents in the interest of national security. How can something that's, 60, 70 years old, why would it still need to be classified in the interest of national security? That question I have often pondered, and I have yet to come up with a rational answer and explanation.
I'll give you one suggestion, and then unfortunately we do have to end, but we'll definitely bring you back, Sergeant Stone, because we have so many people that are interested in what you're saying and still have more to ask, of course, now. So let me say this to you, is the reason I think that we don't know any of this, or we should know, is because of money. Because of money, commercial and military applications. That's what Doty said. He said he cannot speak as to anything that has to do with technology or medicine. He said he will answer that is classified. But if it comes to ETs, he was free to speak about it. That's at least my suggestion. What do you say about that? And then we will go.
Well, the whole situation, if it deals with ETs and you're talking about it, they're not confirming you. So, as far as the world's concerned, you're a nut. You're talking about a nutty subject, and you have no means of proving it. So the whole situation, unless you have to get the government documents, you have no means to prove it. But the situation is what he's saying as far as keeping things quiet because of concern for national security. Yes, that's 100% accurate. And I mean, they get upset with me talking about it, but I'm sorry. I'm not backing off, and I'll be darned if I turn and run. I stand fully. People know my name. They know what I stand for. They come here. I will share the documents. The only thing that I protect, quite frankly, and I'm quite sure if they knew where it was at, they'd try to get it. In 73, we went to a UFO crash there in Georgia. I found one little piece, and I thought, they're not going to miss it. I stuck it into my boot.
Nice. Oh,
and I still have that piece. If you come here,
I'll be there.
I don't have it at the house.
Okay.
But that's close by where I can get it. But I'll tell you right now, the whole situation is, with that, I was scared to go ahead and say publicly, I have that. It wasn't until about a year or so ago that I finally came out and said I showed it to a couple people. And I felt, people need to see this. The only thing, I've been offered as much as $10,000 for that piece. And the people who were here, they were saying, "Oh, that's nothing more than a metal meteorite." I said, "Oh, okay. Well, why don't you go to the meteor crater, and I'm sure they have some metal meteorites there that you can probably buy for a whole lot less than $10,000. Well, no, we would really like to have this piece. Well, I'll tell you something about this piece. There's plutonium in it. Now, I wonder why there's plutonium in it if it's just a metal meteor.
Interesting. Well, what was the
And
answer?
for its mass, it's about 5 times For its mass, it's about 5 times the weight of gold.
Anyhow, Sergeant Stone, that's actually very fascinating. I would think they would also want to use that for, if they could build a weapon, why not? That's usually the goal of plutonium. But we do have to bring you back. So let me just throw out some shout-outs. There's a lot of people in chat. Let me just give a big thank you to all of you, and those of you also who help behind the scenes. Make sure you check out Pam Brettenberg's website, truthseekers.com. And also, as you see on the YouTube screen, there's a link to almost all my social media sites. Everything you could think of is at DRJ Radio Live. The name of the show, folks. So with that being said, I have to end the stream because, it's been 3 hours and I need to get ready. But hey, tomorrow we got another show. And let me just tell you, one guest who is coming up that you guys should probably gear up for is the former Defense Minister of Canada, the Honorable Paul Hellyer. He will be on Tuesday with lots of surprise guests tomorrow with a surprise YouTube-only show, and also, again, on Monday with 2 guests, not 1 but 2. All right, folks? Well, we'll end the stream now, and I will catch you